Hey everybody, welcome to Mammoth Interactive's YouTube channel. First of all, I want to thank you for watching this video. And remember that this channel doesn't do Patreon. Instead, we sell our digital courses down below. And every single dollar that we get from the products you buy below goes into making more content. The best way to help out this channel and Mammoth Interactive is to subscribe to Mammoth Interactive's huge library of content. Get thousands of hours and hundreds of courses for a low price down below. We have a monthly option and a yearly option. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the video.
We are going to start on creating a brand new project. So when you open Illustrator, you'll have a home page, learning page, and if you go down here, you can hit Create New. Alternatively, you can go up to File, New, and the shortcut is Control-N. From there, you'll get a new document scene where you can pick your sizes of what file type you'd like, whether it's mobile, web, print, film and video, or art and illustration. We'll stick with the 1920 by 1080, and I'll show you how to change it while we're also inside. But if you wanted to start off with a new project of your own custom size, you can change it through pixels or any of the other increments over here. You can also adjust the color mode, the raster effects, and the preview mode. We'll stay with default as well as our screen, but keep in mind you can always change these later. And hit Create. After you open your new document, you have different tools on this left-hand side, and you should have layers over here as well, and some other icons on the side over here. If you're missing anything and you're looking for it, you can go up to this window section, go to Workspace, and you can click Essentials Classic or Essentials. This is completely up to you. For what we are going to do, we are going to stick with Essentials Classic. And if you're missing any of the icons that we are talking about, you can always go into the window section and find them down below. And any of the ones that you click will pop right up. Starting with the toolbar, we have a direct selection tool. So what the direct selection tool does is anytime you have a shape, like so, you'll be able to grab and manipulate the shape by moving it around, squashing and stretching, and scaling it. So there's a lot of different things to move them around, and this is the tool you're going to be obviously using the most. Below the selection tool is the direct selection tool. With this you can grab individual points to move your shape, as well as individual paths to manipulate your shape. So this is a really great way to fine-tune different shapes as well. Another great feature of the direct selection tool is if you select a point at a corner and you see a dot in the middle here, if you grab this, it'll round out the edges. So this will become really helpful when you want to have a nice smooth edge. Third on the toolbar is a magic wand tool. This is basically the same as it would be in Photoshop or any other program. It basically selects any of the same fills or strokes. So if you wanted to select just the green squares out of this group, you can click on that and it will grab every single green square. The great thing about this feature is if you needed to change all of the colors of a project, you can select that specific color using this tool and it will grab all of them. And then you can click on this fill color and change them entirely to whatever color you need them to be. There are two different types of pen tools that we'll get in a little bit later, but there's also a text tool where you can create text boxes and type out whatever you like. If you ever needed to change the sizes, you can go up to this character menu here and adjust the size accordingly. You can also find the character menu if you click on the window, type, and character as well. That will pop up an individual character menu over here, and you can adjust everything accordingly as well. From there we have the line segment tool. You can create lines by clicking and dragging. If you wanted to create a straight line in a 45-degree angle, you can hold down Shift. If you use the selection tool and click off, you might not be able to see it. That may be because there's no stroke on the line, so make sure if you wanted to be able to see your line, it has a stroke. To do that, you click on this stroke section. The fill section cannot be in the front, it will have to be behind, so just click on the outlined version and select your stroke color. We have a shape tool. If you click and hold, you can get individual different types of shapes. So rectangles, circles, and even stars. For fun, let's pick the star, and if you click and drag, create a star. If you wanted to make it upright, you can hold down Shift, and it'll snap in place, and you can make it as large as you need to as well. Up next, we have a paintbrush tool. If you wanted to select your brush type, you can go up to the brush definition section, and you can create different types of brush strokes, whether they're textured or straight. If you have a tablet or a pen, you can also adjust these to have a calligraphic brush. We'll stick with the basics shape, and we'll draw ourselves a little wave here. And so what that does is it creates its own set of points based on where your brush stroke was. Keep in mind this is a little bit inefficient due to how many points it adds for a simple shape like this. So primarily we'll be focusing on the pen tool when we get to it. But this is a really great option to get some basic shapes to start. The pencil tool is actually very similar to the pen tool, but it makes the lines a little bit more jagged and will add more points to it. Underneath that we have an eraser tool. The eraser tool is used to remove parts of shapes and split them up. So if I wanted to add a circle in the middle of this, and I wanted to erase it down, it would create this hole within this shape. So it created two separate shapes, one that's more like a donut and one that's like a bite mark out of it. Underneath this is the rotate tool. You can hold it down and you can have the reflect tool as well. These are really helpful when you're creating something that has a lot of symmetry. So if I wanted to reflect it facing the other way, I can click on an anchor point. So this blue dot right here is where the anchor point would be after selecting it. So let's say we wanted to rotate it from this point over here. You would select this anchor point right there, and you can hold and it will rotate around that anchor point. If I wanted to duplicate this design, I can hold down Alt and it will rotate a duplicate design in that way as well. Similar to that, the reflect tool does reflection. So let's put the anchor on the top, and if we reflect it up, it will flip it upward, but it will reflect the shape to where it needs to be. So it doesn't rotate it upward, instead it just reflects it as if the horizon line would be about here. Underneath that is a scale tool where you can again set down an anchor point from where you want it to scale up after you select your object. So select, set your anchor point, and feel free to stretch and squash it as you need to. If you notice that it is warping in a way and you want it to keep a consistent shape of what it started as, you can hold down Shift and it will snap into place. Another part that is in the scale tool is the shear. This one is very similar, but instead of it scaling proportionally, it will actually move all of the points from where you set your anchor point. This is really good if you needed to add shadows or if you needed to have something at an angle. We'll pass over a few of these, but next up we have the gradient tool. So what the gradient tool is, when you select it or you have a shape, you can select this gradient button down here and it will fill it in. Then you select the gradient tool and you can actually adjust anywhere you want the gradient to be, whether it's from outside of the circle, and it can be any shape as well. There's also a gradient type changer up at the top. You can do a linear gradient where it just goes one direction, the radial, which we just saw, and the freedom gradient, which is really unique because you can actually set different gradients depending on where you're starting, and you can change each individual color to whatever you'd like. Underneath that is the eyedropper tool. This one allows you to select different colors just by clicking on whatever shape you want. So right now we have our magenta selected, and if I wanted to select this blue, it'll show down here the change. The other cool thing about this is if you wanted to select individual shapes, hit I for eyedropper, and hold down Shift, you can actually change different colors of the shapes depending on which one you click with the eyedropper tool. I, hold Shift, and click. This is a great way to change colors very quickly and have it be consistent throughout your artwork. From there we have a blending tool, so when you have individual shapes you can actually click from one to another and it will blend all of them together and make their own kind of gradient. It's not used very often, but when it is, it does have a very cool effect. We aren't going to need a few of these other ones, but we'll skip down to the Artboard tool. This one allows you to change the shape of your artboard, whether you click and drag from the sides, or you can adjust the height and width of the artboard up here. You can also duplicate an artboard by clicking on this artboard square in the top left, hold down Alt, click and drag, And it will grab everything within the artboard as well to duplicate it alongside it. So we're going to go over the fill and stroke. Down here at the bottom, you can decide what color fill you want by double-clicking on this little square. From there, you can pick the slider through here and pick whatever color you'd like. We'll go with this nice deep blue. So from there, anytime you make a shape, it will be filled in with that particular color. If we wanted to create a stroke instead, what you would want to do is to click on this swap button right down here. The shape is still exactly the same as it is, but instead of being filled in, it has an outline to it. You can adjust the size of the outline by clicking on these arrows up and down to decide what point stroke you want it to be. If you wanted to have it filled in at the same time, that's really easy to do. Let's say we wanted a nice white outline or a white fill. You can double click on this and pick your other color. And now we have the circle filled in. The other nice thing about having both of these filled in is you can click this swap button. It will swap the strokes with the fill. If I wanted to change the individual colors, that's easy enough to do. You just double click on the fill and you can decide which colors you want the inside to be as well. Same goes for the stroke. You have to double click on the little stroke button, see how it's now in front, and then you can adjust the stroke from this side as well. A helpful way to be able to add shading underneath your strokes is to duplicate your item. So let's take our circle shape and hit Control-C. And then to paste it on top of itself, if you hit Control-V, it'll just paste it in the center of the screen. But if you hit Control-Shift-V, it should paste it right on top. Next, what we're going to do is actually re-add our stroke color, make it a nice size, and we'll get rid of this fill on this side. So we'll click on that and remove it. And what's helpful about this is that we can have a separate stroke shape along with our regular filled shape. The reason why this is really helpful is if we decided to double click on this and copy and paste in place again, we can remove certain points and change the color of that. And when we click back out, the stroke is on top and we get a nice shading effect. This is a really cool way to stylize some of your artwork, whether it's a character or just objects in general. From there, to keep them together, we can group them. So we'll select all of them by clicking and dragging, right-click, and hit Group. Now, anytime you try to grab the shape, it'll grab it as an entire piece rather than the individual shapes within it. If it wasn't grouped, anytime you would try to grab it, you would grab individual pieces instead. So just make sure that you group them together if you decide to do it this way. Next, we're going to go over the pen tool. So this is an incredibly important tool to use. And once you get the hang of it, it will become really, really intuitive. So the pen tool is a type of tool that allows you to create paths. And from these paths, as you decide how you want them designed, you can create different shapes. So there's two different ways to use this tool. You can click each individual spot that you want to create your shape. By doing this, you'll get these hard edges in these corner points. Sometimes the corners will actually allow you to have a curve tool as well, where you can curve the points. If you wanted a little bit more precision on your curves, you can create your own shape by clicking and holding down, and that creates these Bezier handles. These handles allow you to curve your line however you see fit, and you can create the shapes that you were trying to go for originally. After you're done with your shape, you can actually go back with the direct selection tool again, and you can always click on these and change the handles themselves. If you ever have a pointed shape that you want to have handles for and you want them to be curved, you can convert them over from either a pointed corner to a smooth corner. If you want to break the handles, you can hold down Alt and click one side of the handle, and that will give you control on the other side of the Bezier. This is really helpful for when you want a little pointed edge around but having a curved inside. To remove points, it's really easy. You can just select any of the points with your direct selection tool and hit this remove anchor point. If you try to hit delete, it will actually completely remove the entire path that's attached to it, and you'll have an open shape. So always make sure that you use the remove point tool if you decide you want to remove individual points instead. To make curves, there's usually two different ways to go about it. You can either click and drag on what I like to call the peaks and valleys to make these nice curve shapes. Or, alternatively, you can create your hills from the sides as well. Both have their benefits, and it's really up to you which one you decide you like. You're probably going to end up going back and forth between the two styles. Next, we're going to go over layers. So layers are an incredibly important part of your project because that is where every single piece of path or shape will be. Unlike most other programs, Illustrator actually creates its own layer for every single shape and path. Within these layers have groups of different layers. So it definitely gets really, really filled out. So you want to make sure that you're staying as organized as possible from the get-go. So just by taking a look at these, we can see that I have some things that are labeled as paths. Those are my individual whiskers for this cat. From here we have ellipses. So because I use the shape tool to create the eyes, it labels it as an ellipse. The group consists of a stroke, as well as all of the shapes under here, and the color of the cat's face. So what this does is, because it's layered, anything that's on the top will be on top of everything else. So because this yellow circle is underneath these shapes, as well as the stroke, if we were to bring it up on top of everything, it will end up covering everything else. So the order in which your layers are is very important in order to get your design correct. From there, we also have groups. So if you've ever grouped anything together with Control G, it basically puts it in its own little folder for you. So from here, we have the cat ears and the cat outlines for the ears. If you were to hide any of these individual groups, you can actually see, turning them on and off, which parts we're hiding. You can hide an entire group by itself, like this, or you can hide individual path or shapes within the group, like these. So just make sure that everything is in the order that you wanted it to be in order for it to show up properly. The last thing we're going to go over very quickly is the blending modes. So blending mode is something that you can apply to an individual shape. So right here we have this beam of light that's coming in from outside of the frame. And you can change the opacity by dropping it down or raising it back up. From there you can use the drop down of the blending mode and select different options, whether it's darken, multiply, or screen. That's a very bright light. And if you wanted to readjust the opacity of that as well, you can still drop it down. These blending modes are really fun to play with, and you can do different effects with all the different options that are available, so I highly recommend trying them out and seeing which ones will work for your artwork. That should be all of the basics that you need to know to get started, and let's start designing a character. So we're going to create our own custom character. The way I started it out is I picked some colors that I thought the character design would be nice looking with, and I also made different layers for each part of the character. This will be very essential when animating later, so you want to make sure that you're as organized as possible. I have one for the face, head, ears, body, the arm pieces that'll be moving, the leg pieces that'll be moving, and a tail. So we're just going to make a little cat character as our main character. So this size of my artboard is a 1920 by 1080. We're going to shrink it down afterward, but just to get started so we know how big it'll be on the screen, I brought up the full size of the screen itself. So we'll go over to the head section. I put all of these layers in different sections according to where they would be in the design. So the face is on the top because that's the most forward. Then the head, the ears will be tucked behind the head piece, and the body. So to get started, we'll start on the head section and we'll just make a nice ellipse. So I'm going to use my color palette up here. I'm going to hit I for the eyedropper and just select that particular color. I'd say that's a pretty nice shape. I don't want it to be a perfect circle though, so I'll just stretch it out a little bit like that. From there I'll copy and paste in place by Control-Shift-V, and that actually gives us an additional circle. So what I want to do with this circle is actually create a stroke by hitting the switch button, I, holding down Shift and clicking. That created a stroke, but it's a little narrow, so we're going to push up the stroke weight just a few. I think about there looks good. From here we're going to design the pattern, and I'm actually going to be having the character be looking a little bit more this way. So what I'll do is have the patterns on their forehead, and we'll start from here. Click and drag, and click and drag here. So now we have a nice triangle, but I'll actually switch it so it's in here and grab this stroke, hit Control, Shift, right bracket, and what that does is moves it all the way to the top of this layered area. To make it easier on ourselves, we're going to click on this and hold down Alt and click and drag. And what we'll do is actually just shrink this down, use the direct selection tool, grab this point, and pull it forward. Now we can do the same thing. Hold Alt, click, drag, line it up about here, grab this point, and put it up to where the stroke is. Notice that this shape is going outside of the stroke, so we'll just want to readjust this layer right here. Again, we always want to make sure that this is on top of all of our layers, which it is. I'd say that looks pretty good. We'll go up to the face next. Let's give him some eyes. And for the eyes, I just want to use the standard white fill with the black stroke. We'll make our points a little bit larger. And we'll give him nice beady little eyes. Then I'm going to hit Alt and drag. But since this eye is closer to the other side of the face, we want to squash it a little bit to give it a little bit more perspective. Just like that. We can even make this one a little bit bigger because it's a little bit closer to us looking at it. Next, what we'll do is make a very simple little nose. So we're going to use the ellipse tool again. Make a circle like this. But instead what we're going to do is we're going to zoom into this and grab this little point and just drag it down a little bit. From there, we'll double click on our fill. Pick a nice pink color. And then on this fill, we'll pick a deeper pink. Now it has a cute little nose. Now we're going to use our pen tool. So we'll actually color pick this side, this edging. So we'll hit I. Hold Shift when you're selected on this stroke. Click, and that should make it that orange. What will happen is it will accidentally fill in some pink between the lines, which we don't want. So click and drag and bring it up. So we want to get rid of these pink lines. That's easy enough to do. You just click on this fill and hit remove. There's a little bit of a flat edging on this stroke. So when we click on it and go up to stroke, we'll adjust the corners and caps to be nice and rounded to give it a nice soft look. We'll come back to get all the details in the face later, but that'll give us a nice idea of where we should line up everything. Let's move on to the ears. So for the ears, what we're going to do is use our pen tool, and we're going to click and drag, and we'll give them a little bit of a fluff at the top. So you can shape the ears however you want. I like to give them a little bit of rounded and a little fuzzy bit on top. If you find that the ears are a little too oversized or you want to readjust it, you can always scale it afterward. I tend to like the larger sized ears, just so we can animate them bouncing a little bit more, but we'll definitely make them a little wider. Next, we'll add the detail on the inside of the ear. And we can actually color pick the nose to get that nice shading inside. For the outside, we'll fill it with the yellow. We'll copy, paste in place, and grab that orange again. The nice thing about having these on separate layers is if you select the layer, you can actually click and rotate, and you can see how they might move in the future. So it's always good to keep your layers separated. If we wanted to make it really easy on ourselves, we can grab this entire ear and duplicate it over here, clicking and dragging while holding Alt. It's facing the wrong way, but that's easy enough to fix. All you have to do is right-click, transform, reflect, and just make sure your reflect is on vertical, and hit OK. So we'll put it on this side, and we'll have it a little bit more upright. That looks pretty cute. Since this ear is kind of tucked behind the other way, I think it would make more sense to squash it a little bit more just to have that perspective of where the face is. From there, you can make any kind of adjustments you want with the eyes or the ears. I think I'm going to make the eyes a little bit more comically large. And then we can add pupils in. So in order to animate the pupils afterward, I think what I'll do is add a new layer just for the pupils themselves. We'll add a nice little round part, and we'll give them nice cat green eyes. We'll make the strokes nice and green too. We can always add a little bit of shine in it too. That's a pretty cute shape. So we'll grab our shape as well as this by holding Shift and selecting both, holding Alt, and dragging it across. Since this eye is over here a little bit more, we'll squash it and just set it in. These eyes will end up moving as a group, so no matter where they look, they'll be within here. One thing to consider is if you wanted the eyes to be able to go farther back and not be in front of the black line, you'll probably need an extra layer. Grab the black outline from these, Control-C, select your new layer, Control-Shift-V, and remove the fill. Now whenever you move these, they can end up going behind the black outline a little bit more. Keep in mind, you'll still end up crossing over it a little bit at some point, but it is nice to give yourself a little bit more extra wiggle room. And just for the sake of it, we'll call this eyeliner. Let's continue with more details in the face, and we'll give them a set of whiskers. So now we're going to use our brush tool, color pick the black outline, but we're going to want to make it a little bit smaller. We'll do 2 points. Hit your brush, B, and just draw a couple whiskers. That's pretty cute. I feel like it's a little hard to see the outline, and the cool thing is you can always go back and adjust it. So if I wanted to adjust all of these outlines, what I can do is select one of them, hit select, same stroke color, and that grabs everything of that color. From here, all we have to do is double click on the stroke and make it a darker color. That makes the character pop out a little bit more. If you wanted your character to extra stand out from a background, you can always set all of the outlines of the character to black. It just depends on the style and what you're looking for. Feel free to go in and make any adjustments if you find anything that doesn't look quite the way you want it to be, because all those little adjustments go a long way. And if you ever needed to change the face or wanted to adjust the size of something individually, you can always click on these little circles over here while holding down Control and then making sure they're all highlighted. What's nice about this is you can end up squashing in, stretching, or adjusting everything manually. And all of these are in individual parts, so they're really easy to change over time. We'll work on the body next. We're going to create a really simple shape just to have him have like a little t-shirt on. So we'll make our line. And another line like that. And you want it to go all the way past where his neck is. And that way when his head rotates, or if it rotates, it'll give us a little bit more of a variety of movement. So almost like a little cone. We'll do this thing we've been doing where we copy and paste in place. And we'll select this color up here, this nice bright blue color. Put it to the back, and our stroke actually has a fill of white. That's why it disappeared, so we'll just get rid of that. So for the arms, I actually have broken them into 2 pieces. We have the left arm on the top, which would be right here, and the left arm on the bottom, but we'll have to actually drag these on top of the body. That way they'll show in front of the sleeve itself. So to use some more shape tools, we're going to go into our rounded rectangle tool and create a nice little round rectangle like this. We're going to take these points and smooth them out even more. We're going to bring it over here, just like that. So this will kind of be where his shoulder is, and then we're going to fill it in with the yellow, copy it, paste it again, and put the black outline around it. The nice thing is when you use the eyedropper tool to pick the stroke, it'll actually pick the same stroke size as everything else. We're going to just copy both the fill and the stroke layer and hit paste. And we're going to attach it right down here. So you want to think about where the arm will be moving. So I like to curve it a little bit so I can see where the joints would fit. Because these are attached, we don't want it to look too much like a puppet, so we're actually going to go in, take this point and hit delete, and this other point and hit delete as well. And what that'll do is create a nice shape for when we rotate the arm. We'll probably have to push this arm down too. So we're going to take all of these points here for the yellow shape underneath and drag it down just so it sticks up just above where the hard edges are. So if we take this and move it over, you can kind of see the shape that we're going for. The other thing to make it smoothed out when we attach it to the arm is to adjust the caps. So we'll go up to our stroke layer and hit the round cap. What that does is now when it's on top of the other layer, if we decide we want to move it, probably about here, and make sure it's on the bottom layer right here. We'll actually drag this arm on top of the other arm. And now when we use our rotate tool to test it out, You can kind of see it has a little bit of movement. This is where you'll want to go and fine tune it just to make sure that it lines up nicely. So we'll scooch it over about here. Pick where we would be rotating. And it gives us a little bit more movement. Now that we have one of the arms completed, we can actually recycle these pieces for the other parts of our design. So we'll go into our layers panel and grab these two for the left arm of the bottom. Make sure you're clicking on it so it highlights it green, or whatever color yours is. Hit Control C. Click on the bottom of the right arm, Control V. And that should put it in that layer and leave it right where it was pasted. But we're going to go back and click on the rounded rectangle here for the top of the arm. Make sure that they're both selected. Hit Control C. Go down to the right arm top. Control V. And now we're going to scooch it up and just line it up pretty much the same way that the other arms were lined up. From here we can highlight and grab all of these at the same time, and now we're moving both of those layers. We're going to rotate it and put it on the other side of their body. Since this one is further back in perspective, we want to make it sure it's a little bit smaller, just by a smidge. To make it sure that it will rotate properly, we'll shrink it while holding down Shift, and that way it keeps the form properly. If you didn't have Shift, it would end up squashing and stretching it, and then when you try to rotate the arm, it wouldn't quite work. I'd say that looks pretty good. To make the legs, we're going to do something very similar of how we made the arms. We're going to make sure we have some layers here. So here's my right leg layer, and we have one layer for the top and for the bottom. So we'll start with the top of the leg. Grab our rounded rectangle tool, add a little leg in here, click the direct selection tool, smooth it out, and we'll make them a little bit thicker. We're going to grab another one and hold down Alt and Shift so it slides in place. See how it's nice and even, and you see that pink line showing that it's lined up really well? We're going to want to keep it like that. We're going to copy both of these and paste them in place by hitting Control-Shift-V. We're going to hit the I key to color pick this. From there, we can hit Control-Shift-Bracket, or you can move them all the way to the bottom layer here. Once again, we're going to need to remove some of this part, so that way when we rotate the knee, it will be showing without the caps moving as much. So in order to do that, we want to separate the bottom. So we'll take these two by just clicking and dragging and selecting both. Control X, go up to this right leg layer, Control Shift V to paste it in place. Now what we're going to want to do is do what we did earlier and delete these top points here. So just click the very top one on the stroke, and you can tell it's selected on the stroke over here, and hit delete. We're going to delete this one as well. And then we're going to grab these 2 points onto the yellow, grab the top, left, right, and use the arrow key just to drop them down. There may be an extra point here, so you want to make sure you select all of them. If you're having trouble selecting them because they're overlapping, one easy way to do this is to hit Control Y. That goes into a mode called Outline Mode, and that way it will only select things that are within this outline, and it makes it a lot easier to grab onto things that you're hoping to grab onto. So since there's 2 points here, we can click and drag, and then hold Shift, click this one, and this one. And then we can hit our arrow key down to make sure it smooths out. We'll grab this stroke here as well and go back to our selection tool. So when we click on this, we can adjust the stroke to have caps and corners rounded. There's still a little bit showing right here, so we're going to want to scooch this down a little bit more. So we'll go back into our mode, grab these ones. Back here, hold Shift, click on this anchor point and this anchor point, and bring it down. And then to make it a little bit smoother, we can grab these two and scooch them up just a little bit. That's a nice way to have it be smoothed out. So if we grab this bottom half of the leg and use our rotate tool and put it right here, we can see how it'll move. That looks pretty good. So depending on where you put that rotation point, that's going to be really crucial in order for your joints to look really smooth. So just make sure that you're placing it in the right place, not too high, not too low. And it's okay to experiment to see where it is. Now that we have these two, we're going to grab them both, Control C, Control Shift V, and we're just going to drag it over. This gives a nice set of 2 legs, but we're going to want to separate them so when we animate them later, it'll be a lot easier. We're going to need to make 2 more layers. So we'll call this left leg top, and this is their left leg, but it's our right. And we're going to paste it in this layer. We'll make a new layer called left leg bottom, drag it in between, grab this, Control X, click on left leg bottom, Control V. And now we have 2 pairs of legs. If we wanted to stylize it a little bit more, we can add little shorts onto the top layer. So why don't we do that? We're going to select the right leg top layer, and you can also do that by selecting the object themselves and clicking off. Grab our pen tool, and just give them a cute little pair of shorts. It'll be 1 pant leg per leg. We'll go back up to our color palette up here, and we'll pick the nice fun pink color for a nice pair of pink shorts. If you wanted to copy and paste a stroke without it going on top of everything else, you can always double click on it, and it'll go into this thing called isolation mode. From here you can Control C, Control Shift V, hit I to get the eyedropper tool, click on a path, and select that. To get out of it, simply just double click anywhere outside of your object. If we grab these 2, Control C, we can go back to the other top leg layer on the left leg, and paste it, and drag it over. We'll want to rotate it a little bit, and maybe reflect it so it fits properly. That's kind of cute. What we'll do is just stretch this one out a little bit more, because this one's a little bit more forward than the other one. We'll make sure it's even with the leg. And if you wanted, you can even shorten the long shirt a little bit, and make any adjustments this way as well. But we do want to make sure that there's plenty of room up here, so when we grab these and rotate them, they don't cut off like that. So if you ever wanted to give yourself a little bit more wiggle room, you can always go back into your object. So we'll grab these 2, and you can always stretch up the points past, because you won't be able to see them normally anyway. And we'll do the same for this side. If you want to make sure they're lined up, you can also go into here, Control Y, drag it up, and then to fix this side, we'll bring this one down. Easy. Control Y again to get out of the outline mode, and now we have a cute pair of shorts on our little cat. The last thing we want to add is the tail, and we're going to make it pretty much a straight tail because we'll end up using some tools to make it wave a little bit more. So we're going to make a relatively straight tail with a little curve at the end, but not too much. Because again, we're going to be changing this as we're animating it. And sometimes having a very basic base is a really great way to start. We'll move the points so they're all lined up together and make it a little bit easier to see. We'll hit the eyedropper tool to make sure we can color pick the yellow. We'll double click so it goes into isolation mode, Control C, Control Shift V, hit the eyedropper tool again, and click on a stroke. And there we go, that's the basic character shapes. Next we're going to add in some details and shading to our little character here. So in order to make them a little bit more interesting to look at rather than these basic shapes, we can go in and add different little details, as well as shading different parts of their face. I think the first place to start would be the head. And we can actually add some cute little tufts of hair here. So on the head layer, which we're going to keep the same, we'll add little tufts of fluff to show that they're more cat-like. And then when you go in, you can always readjust your strokes and shapes afterward, just to smooth them out and make them look a little bit more natural. And don't worry if your points are sticking out, we're going to adjust that afterward. So we're going to break this handle here. Scooch that one out. We'll break this handle to go upward a little bit, as well as this one. And we'll fill in with the yellow color. We'll move it on in so it's coming in from the inside of this. And we'll copy it, paste it, and use the eyedropper tool to grab this. In order to make it feel like it's part of the face without it having this layer here, we're going to add a new point. So when you click on Pen tool, you can actually go to the Add Anchor Point tool. And then right where the intersection of the other stroke is, we'll add a point right on this line. We'll do the same for down here. Now, when we delete these points, here and here, it'll actually line up pretty nicely with this area. We're going to want to smooth out these strokes by smoothing the cap in the corner. And we can have it overlap a little bit to show that the fluff is coming from the cheeks. I'd say that looks pretty cute. To make it easy on ourselves, we're going to grab this one, hit Control-C and Control-V, right-click, Transform, Reflect, hit OK, and we'll put it on this side. But instead of having it in the front like we have it with the other one, we'll move the layer down. So we'll grab these two by clicking on these circles and highlighting them and dragging them underneath the head shape itself. In order to make this look a little bit smoother, what we're going to do is move them down a little bit, but also we're going to grab onto this stroke, add some extra points in between here, 1 and 2. Use the direct selection tool to click off and then click back on in between those 2 points and hit delete. Hit the stroke button and smooth the caps. And now you have a nice smooth shape while showing that the cheeks are there, but they're a little bit tucked back. And we're going to squash them in a little bit, just to give them a different perspective. Let's add some details around the eyes to make them a little bit more cat-like. We're going to go back to our normal pen tool, click on the face section, and now we can draw on top of the face. So we'll add a little point up here, and a little point down here, and close it off. So what we'll do is we'll also hit this key to fill it in, and then bring it behind the eye ellipses. We'll rotate it and adjust it how we want, just to give it a little bit more personality. We can grab and copy these ones, holding Alt to move them over. Right click, Transform, Reflect, hit OK, and we're going to squash this one down and put it on this side. It's okay if it sticks out a little bit because it kind of looks like eyelashes. And this should be movable if you grab all of the face icons. This one's a little bit lower, so we're going to go back and we're going to stretch this one down a little bit and move it in, just to give it a little bit more of a shape. And if you find that when you're stretching them and this is cutting over, you can always move these shapes back up so they don't overlap too much. Next, we're going to add some stripes on the tail. So what we're going to do is double click on this yellow piece, and you can see where the stroke is usually. So following along the lines we already have, we're going to make a nice tail tip color. And we're just going to stretch out them so it fits around. We'll make the tip of the tail white, so we can just color pick the eye or the background. Now we're going to add some little tiger stripes. So click and drag and make your stripes. They can be as thick or as thin as you want. But for the stripes, what we're going to do is scroll up, click eye, and select this orange color that we have up top. We'll do the same and add another one. And we're going to round this one out a little bit more to make it feel a little bit more rounded. It almost looks a little bit three-dimensional. Now when you click off, you can see the little stripes in there. I feel like we should give the cat little mittens and paws, so we're going to double click on this one. Do the same thing we just did. Click and drag. Click. Click and drag. I want this point to be smooth because it's accidentally a hardened one. So we're going to click on this, hit convert to smooth, and then just rearrange the handles. Hit the eyedropper tool, select the background color, and click off. I think it would also be cute to give them little paw mittens. So we're going to scroll up. We're going to color pick this pink color. We're going to remove the fill, and we're just going to use a brush to give it a couple little paws. If it's ever overlapping outside, that's easy enough to do. You can just grab it and make sure that it's within the black stroke. The nice thing is when you're in your isolation mode, as soon as you click out of it, it will stay within these layer orders. So your black stroke will pop up on top of it again. And you can always move it if you decide you want to change where it's located. We'll do the same thing for this side. Double click. Create your outlines. Eyedropper tool. Select the white. And now we'll use our eyedrop. Select the pink. Hit B for brush. And draw some little feet. They're looking pretty cute. I feel like they should have some sleeves. We already have cute shorts on, and I feel like the shirt will benefit a lot from having some sleeves. In order to make sure the sleeves are in the right location, we're going to double click on the top of the arm. But we don't want to be in the isolation mode because then the sleeves would be behind the stroke. So we're just going to click on it just to make sure we're on the right layer, and we're going to use our pen tool. We'll add a little bit of sleeves here. Click, off, and then back on. Hit stroke. Cap the keys to make it nice and smooth. We'll copy it and double click to go in, paste it, eyedropper tool, and grab the blue color. We want it to be behind so we can just drag this down to be below the stroke. While we're in here, let's decorate the inside of the sleeve a little bit. I feel like having a nice light blue to complement the dark blue as a stripe would be really cute. So we'll just click on our fill color. But we'll want to switch it to the stroke section. We can use our pen tool for this as well, and click here, and here. The stripe is a little thin, so we're going to make it nice and thick. We'll go about 4 points. Make sure that this is below by bringing this one up. Maybe having 2 stripes would be fine. There we go. We'll just duplicate it by holding Alt when we drag it. That's pretty cute. So I'm going to grab all of this. To make it easy, we're just grabbing the sleeves in the 2 stripes. Control C, click on this one, Control V, and if it's behind you can just hold the arrow key to get it out. There it is. We're going to hit right click, transform, reflect, hit OK. We're just going to line it up with this sleeve over here. Squash it a little bit because it's in the back. And then click off. They're looking a little bit tense, so we're going to lower the sleeves a smidge. And if you wanted to see where they lined up with the actual arms, you can go into this mode, Control Y, and then drag it down from there. It's giving me a baseball jersey feel, so I feel like we should add some details on the shirt that makes them feel like they're part of a team. So let's double click. And we're going to use our type tool for this. We're going to click and drag, and we'll give them the number 4. You can pick any font that you like. I'll go with a nice rounded font and make it nice and large. I'd say that's a good size. So what we're going to do in order to make this more maneuverable, we're going to go to Type and Create Outlines. And now we can squash and stretch the shapes and even change individual points within these shapes. So I'm going to use a different tool. We're going to use one called the Shear tool by clicking on the scale and going down to Shear. We're going to click the bottom of here and just squash it a little bit and adjust it to make it feel like it's really stretching on the t-shirt. You can rearrange the numbers and change them however you like. I'm also going to give them a nice round ellipse on their shirt. So we'll put it in the center here, but squash it over. And we'll make the circle this nice blue color. When you color pick it, it'll only pick this outline. That's easy enough to switch over. You just click on the button. We want to make sure that it is covering the 4, so we'll stretch it a little bit more. Going into our body layer, we can put this below the 4 itself and below the stroke. And that way when it hits the edge of this t-shirt, you can't see it. And we can just rearrange this a little bit more. I'm going to shrink down my 4 And shrink down the circle as well. Just to make the circle pop a little bit more, I'm going to add another outside stroke color. That'll be white. And on the inside of the 4, I'll color pick the shirt. The only problem is, if we decided we wanted to flip our character, picking a number like 4, when you switch it, the 4 will be backwards. So sometimes it's actually best to go in and pick a number that's reflectable. That looks pretty good. I think to add a little bit more detail, we're going to put some stripes on the bottom of the shirt. So let's double click on our shirt again, click off, select the stroke, pick pen tool, and add a few more stripes on the bottom of this shirt. It's always good to zoom in and double check to make sure that your strokes aren't going over. And just to make sure it's nice and smooth, we'll grab both of these and smooth the end caps. It's a little crooked, but that's easy enough to fix. We can just go in, adjust the handles, and lower this other line here. I think they're ready to play some sports. So the last thing we're going to do for this character is to give it a little bit of shading. Shading is really nice because it adds a lot of personality and a lot of details that go usually unnoticed, but when you do notice them, it's a very nice touch. So we'll probably add some shadows behind the ears to kind of help separate it a little bit, some highlights on the tail, and some more features on the bottom. Maybe even add some paws on the bottom too. So we'll start with the ears. If we zoom in and we can click on our ear tab, we have 2 paths that are the outlines here. The shading will go on top of the solid colors, but underneath the pathing. So we're going to add from here and stretch it over to here, all the way down, all the way to this side, and here. So notice how it's still on top of one of these pathings. So we're going to want to grab it and drag it underneath the right ear. So this puts it behind here. We're going to remove the stroke. And we're going to add a nice orangey color, a nice dark orange. You can't really see through it, and it looks a little odd when it's overlapping. So what we're going to do is go up to our opacity button, click over the blend modes, and go to multiply. It's a little too dark and a little too noticeable, so we'll just turn the opacity a bit down, probably to about 30%. I'd say that looks pretty nice. We can even move it down just a little bit more because it doesn't need to be that dramatic. To add a highlight on the top of this ear, we'll go into here as well, and we'll go from here, over, here, drag. Instead of orange, we're going to use a nice brighter yellow color. So now we can double click on this, pick a lighter shade of yellow, and click off. And if you find that this is a little too off-putting, you can always scooch this down and have the shadow more around the pink of the ear. Like that. Let's do the same thing on this side. So we're going to start by clicking on this yellow, click off, click, drag it up, click to here, down, make our shape. Since we already have the color and the blend mode on this part, if we use our eyedropper tool, it'll actually copy that over, including the blend mode. We're going to want to drag this below the outline stroke layer, click off. Because this ear is a little bit farther back, I'm actually going to change this color of the yellow to be a little bit darker as well. And we're not going to add a highlight on that ear. So you can see that since this one is more forward and the light's hitting it here, whereas this one's a little bit further back. So we're going to add the highlight on this side, kind of reflecting how our other highlight is. But instead of picking a brighter yellow, we're actually going to select the actual color of the ear and then move it underneath. That's kind of fun. Next, we're going to make a nice shadow on the cheek here. So let's double click into this yellow. So we have our circle. A really easy way to do this is copy, Control C, paste in place, Control Shift V. And to make sure we're not going to accidentally delete any of the other paths, we're going to double click again, and this brings it into another isolation mode of just this shape. I'm going to remove this point and this point. But we're not going to hit delete because that'll delete it entirely. We're just going to hit the minus key. From there, we're going to break this handle by holding down Alt and dragging it down. With the eyedropper tool, we can pick this color that we used on the ears. click off, click here. So see how this is a little bit too pointed? What we're going to want to do is take this spot and smooth it out. But you want to make sure you're only selecting this point because otherwise it'll smooth out all of the other ones. Because it's so straight and the head is so round, we're actually going to readjust this point a little bit more. So in order to make it easier on ourselves, we're going to use our pen tool and make sure it's the add anchor point and put it right in the middle. What that does is it gives us a new point and it keeps the consistency of the curve. So all we have to do is drag this point down. That's really nice. So that way the little fluff is casting a shadow on its cheek. Let's put some shadows under these sleeves here, just to give it a little bit of depth. So we're going to double click on this. Go to our pen tool. Click here, go to the center point, arch it up, click down, arch it around, connect the anchor point. We can scroll up, use our eyedropper tool by clicking I, selecting this again. And when we click off, because we were in isolation mode for this specific color, it should be underneath the strokes layer here. To make it a little bit noticeable, you can double click back in, and we'll move it down a little bit. We're going to do the same thing on the other arm. So let's go, double click, add some points, make a nice arch, here, here, and close it off. Before we exit our isolation mode, we can use our eyedropper tool, click on the shading, click the selection tool, double click off. So we have some nice shades. So we're going to double click on this leg, do the same thing we've been doing, where we just create these nice shapes. Although we'll have it going downward to kind of match the shorts. We'll want to scooch it up a little bit more. Scroll on up, click I for eyedropper. And let's just rearrange it a little bit more like that. So see how this is interacting and kind of overlapping this? So that's an indicator that we need to move this up very close to the edge here. We can actually, since these are facing the exact same way, we can copy this one by Control C, double click in this one, Control Shift V, and drag it over. And we'll move this point down a little bit so it lines up with the edge. Double click out. Those are pretty even, but we're going to make this one go up just a little bit more. In general, this leg should be a little bit higher than this one just because of the angle they're standing at as well. We're going to move on down to the feet. Double click on this one. And instead of shading it, we're actually going to give it some orange to kind of go with the paws up here. But instead of white, we'll use the orange that's on the tail. Like that. Scooch this down. And before we leave isolation mode, we're going to copy this by Control C, double click out, and now when we click on this one, Control V, we can just place it right on top. And that'll save us some time. Just make sure that the outside edges are still hidden by the stroke itself. Next, we're going to add a nice highlight on the tail. So we're going to double click on this tail, Control C, and Control V. To do this, we're going to make it a little bit easier on ourselves. We're going to grab this point, and this point of our copied path, and drag it up like this. So it's a little hard to see. If you go into outline mode, you can see exactly where it's going to end up. So we're just going to move this. We're going to move this a little bit higher. And it's okay if it sticks out a little bit because we can always scooch that down so it stays within the shape. When we leave, we won't be able to see it just yet, but we're going to copy this lighter color. And to make sure that it goes over the stripes that are already there, we're going to need to cut, paste in place, move down to our tail layer, and move it underneath the stroke. But you'll notice that it is covering those stripes, so we'll want to make sure that we cover it by going into our blend mode and clicking soft light. And we can even lighten it a little bit too. We'll put it to 80. That just makes it a little bit shinier and pops out a little bit more. Another thing we can do to add a little bit of texture to the shirt is double click, Control C, Control Shift V. We have two of these now, so when we double click, we'll end up in isolation mode. And we're going to take this path and move it down here. Then instead of a sharp handle, we're going to use this convert the anchor points to smooth. And see how it kind of gives this nice curve to it? We're going to leave that right there. But what we're going to do is click on this, make it a little bit darker. We'll cut it out, go back, paste it. When we drop our body menu, we want it to be under the stroke. Go into opacity, change it to overlay, and turn the opacity down to 30. That gives it a nice subtle change, and you can even see it crossing over these stripes. We should be able to do the same thing to the sleeves as well. So we'll copy this, paste it in place, double click to go into isolation mode, and see how this one is top. If we end up moving this point, it'll just scooch down there. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a new point right in this corner. Click and drag it over. We're going to break this handle here so it goes up and goes along this edge. So we have this fun curve here, and we're going to break this handle as well to make sure it curves along this side. Since we already have something with our opacity layer on here, we can use our eyedropper tool and select that one. Double click out, and it should be under that layer as well. And you can see the subtle lines. The only difference for this side is we're going to end up copying this whole thing, pasting it on top, and coloring the entire thing instead. So we're going to cut this, paste it again, and we'll just make sure that it is underneath the stroke layer right here. Because this one's further back, we want it to be a little bit darker. If you feel that the shading difference is not dramatic enough, you can always go and click on one of them, select, same, fill color, so they're all the same color, go into your opacity, and bump it up to about maybe 50 or 60. And that makes it a little bit more dramatic so you can see the difference in the colors, especially on the stripes. I think the only other thing we really want to do, just to give this character a little bit more personality, is to add an additional facial expression. So what we want to do to make sure that we can do this is take our eyes, and we're going to separate the eyes out from the rest of the face. So we'll take all of these eyeball pieces and move them up here. It doesn't look like anything's really changed, but all of the whiskers and the mouth are on their own layer now, as well as the nose. So these will be open eyes. And we'll have to remember that all the eyeliner, the pupils, and the open eyes are all four together in a group. We're going to hide all of these ones, but except we'll grab onto this one. That way we can see where it is. We're not going to be drawing on that layer, however, so you want to create a new layer, and we'll say closed eyes. And we'll do one more layer, and we'll do half eyes. So the half eyes are actually going to go on top of the pupils and on top of the eyeliner as well. The reason we want to do that is because we can actually add our own little eyelid right here and click over. Just line it up. And we'll go up a little bit more above. We'll color pick the yellow behind it. Squash it in as just a smidge. Control C, Control V. And make our outline here. We do want to make sure that they are attached, so we're going to add another point here. We'll just have it scooch across like this. So if the character is blinking, we do want to make sure that it is moved down a little bit more so it's almost in line. And we'll go and drag this one across and kind of copy it over to make it easier. So now before they blink, you can see they have a little bit of animation between. But we'll just make sure these are as close as possible to the top edge here. It's also fun to give it an extra facial expression. The nice thing about having the half eyes on top of the eyeliner and on top of the pupils is you can still move your pupils around and they won't really be affected by the eyelids themselves. So let's hide all of these by clicking the eyeball button. We'll leave the open eyes here just to see it, and we'll put the closed eyes on top. To make it feel a little bit more natural, we're going to follow along and use this as our guide. So make sure that your closed eyes is visible, and we're going to click and drag. Click and drag across. Go up to the edge of this eyeliner here. And just connect it. We're going to also fill it with black. So double click on the fill and just bring it down. And to make it a little bit more obvious, we're going to make a little bit of shine here. So we're going to use an ellipse tool and just add a little bit and fill the color in with white. And we'll actually duplicate the circle and just overlap them a little bit. Now when we hide our other eyeballs, you can kind of see where their eyes are going to be blinking. We're going to grab this, duplicate it across. I'm going to unselect these two spots and just grab this one to reflect it. Hit OK. Bring it in, and we're going to squash it a little bit tighter and a little bit further down. And we're going to grab these two and make them a little bit smaller. So now you can see when the eyes are open, first when they're half closed, and when they're fully open.
Hey everyone, thanks for watching this course. If you want to watch the rest of the course, the link is down below. Not only will you get the access to this course, but you'll get access to a lot of other courses in a huge bundle, and it's on sale today. So buy before the sale ends. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in another video.